Rebecca with the Nocturnal. How are you?
I'm great, Rebecca, with the Nocturnal. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So tell me a little bit about your character, Hayden.
Oh my goodness. Well, he didn't have a name. He wasn't called Hayden when I first signed on, and I was a little nervous about it. He was called Hot White Guy, and I kind of felt like I'd graduated to characters with actual names and not like bartender number one. But yes, Hayden Wells Garrett is I like him. He's a small town mayor from Kansas, served in the military with grand political aspirations.
When they first gave him the nickname in the show, I was like, okay, all
Oh,
right.
I was I was expecting you to be like hot. I don't know, maybe a couple years ago, but now
No,
AJ.
I was like, I would have went for handsome,
Yes, thank
handsome
you.
presidential candidate. I was like, hot white guy. That's, descriptive for sure.
Yeah, it's literally the first three episodes. He didn't have a name, so everyone was like, sometimes the ads or the producers will be like, "Where's Hot White Guy?" I'm like, "Oh, come on, please call me Scott." Crazy.
At least as the show continues, we learn who you are for sure in the show. So the show was inspired by Amy's best-selling book, Chasing Hillary. So did knowing this help in how you prepared or like approached this role in any way?
Totally. I mean, I before we even started filming, I read her book. Obviously, read the chapter "Girls on the Bus" a couple times, which is what the show is sort of based on, that specific chapter. But the fact that the show is created by a true political journalist who spent so much time on the road with not just Hillary Clinton, but with multiple candidates over a decade, 12 years of a career. It lent a lot of credibility to it, in my opinion, and in my eyes. And one of the things that I loved was, they gave me so little when it came to this character. He was a military guy who was now a mayor in Kansas, and he had political aspirations. And it sort of turned a light on in me in the Pete Buttigieg sort of world, and I did a deep dive on him and all his interviews and media that he did in that presidential election. So that was a big help to me.
One of the things I loved about the show is like, even though there are quirky moments and like there are like, moments where like I just can't stop laughing, it's also very relatable to today, especially with the, entire election that's coming up. I'm like, wow, like I see how it relates to today. And I just loved it because it just felt real to me.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I felt the same thing. I mean, look, it's obviously a fictionalized version of an electoral race, but there are a lot of parallels that we see today. For me, the biggest one is I didn't realize how. I mean, look, I consume news and political news as much as the next person. Maybe not as much as some, maybe more than some others, but you know. I didn't realize how intertwined media and politics really are. And I've said this before, but if I want to do my own research on a political candidate, the
Mhm.
only way I can do that is through media interviews, is through op-ed pieces, is through, and so they go hand in hand. You can't have politics without media.
Very true. Very true. It is very true. You need one for the other and to be informed about it all. And there's
Agreed.
so many different resources that you can go through, which is why I liked, especially in this show, how like the different forms of journalism were presented. You have print, then you have like shows that are similar to the ones we see today. So it's like for me, I'm like, I can follow every different perspective.
I think it's important, and you don't just get the print, the media, and the social media, but you also get the different, sort of like our country is today, the different polarizations. You get the conservative and the liberal, and it's for me. Look, there are shows that are like this show based around a political campaign. There are shows like Grey's Anatomy that are medical. There are shows that like Law and Order that are legal. But at the end of the day, that stuff is just sort of a playing board, right? Where the characters are allowed to flourish. And the fact that we can tell this story about really found friendships amongst these four women, and it's told in sort of a comedic light, I think it lends an air of watchability to this show that some political shows some take themselves really seriously, and this does not necessarily do that, and I appreciate that.
And I don't know if you've seen on social media, but like people have been talking about your character and comparing him to the one that you had on Scandal. And they're basically saying that they are rooting for you and this is your redemption story and they hope
Oh,
that you get a better ending. So, what do you want to say to your fans who are rooting for Hayden and like looking forward to seeing how the outcome of the election is?
well, I love that. I love the fact that I've been doing this long enough that there are people that can sort of track one character the next and connect them in a way that I wouldn't necessarily think of. So, yes, I hope that Scott Foley's character in this new show gets some redemption that people feel that Jake didn't get. Jake sort of became the scapegoat to a certain degree on Scandal. And, I'm hoping that the story, the narrative created for Hayden in this allows people to enjoy whatever I do that much more.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. Tell me a little bit about your characters, Grace and Kimberlyn.
Well, Grace is grown up she's grown up since the moment she can remember in a world of journalism. Her father was a famous journalist, and she definitely has a sort of seen many decades of how journalism has changed so much, and yet she remains insanely passionate about it. And I think it's actually her sort of lust for life that keeps her going, and the desire to get the truth out there and to get to the truth out there fast, in her case, as being queen of the scoop. But she's extremely adept at what she does. She has a lot of wily ways to get her stories fast, but she's usually above board, and she's also in a moment where she's grappling with her daughter, who is becoming a young woman and who is sort of calling her mom out on her less than stellar parenting, and her relationship with her husband is really in a tricky place, and she's kind of finally starting to take a little bit of responsibility for that, and yeah, and it's a really interesting moment in her life.
And Kimberlyn is sort of similarly sort of ambitious, wants to get the story, wants to get it all done, and then also wants so many things in her personal life. She wants to have a family and she wants to be married, and she's sort of at the cusp of a lot of things where she's finally getting some traction in her career, and at the same time she's getting engaged, and at the same time she's trying to figure out, does she even fit at this network that she's wanted to be at for so long, and as a Black conservative, does she fit in the world even, and so she's grappling with a lot, and it's pretty fun to watch that tension play out.
Definitely. I think one thing I loved about both of your characters is watching them both attempt to have that work-life balance, where they try to, with your character, moving your daughter into college, trying to maintain your husband's relationship and everything. And then you planning a wedding. It was like so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would lose my mind. I would lose it.
They're losing their minds.
So like in the series, I feel like your characters are like pushing to prove themselves beyond the limits that others are placing against them. So in terms of your characters, how do you feel like how do you think they're going to elevate and push themselves to basically go past the limits that others are trying to put against them?
Well, you know what's interesting? I would say, Christina, I'm curious if you agree with this about both of these characters in particular. Well, I mean, Lola's quite like that too, but the inner barometer for I think they're their own harshest critics, and so in a way, I think it's less about the societal pressure or pressure from the outside, even though for sure they are defying boxes, being put into boxes. But I think that part of it is this sort of inner drive to be as good as they can be. And I think possibly, and I'd be curious also, Amy, we've never spoken about this, but I think she's written women, certainly Sadie as well, although I think Sadie's in a moment of having so many influences coming her way that she's kind of confused as to how to do it right in this moment, and how to claim her own voice, which is also such an interesting journey. But I think there's something about these characters that also, like the drive is coming from inside, and they're pushing through resistance, even if they don't know the answers yet. And so I don't know, I find that aspect of it really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right, Carla, that for so many of the choices that they're confronting and the choices that they make, it's not somebody else telling them what they need to do and have to do. It's their own idea of what they thought they would be and thought success looked like. And I wrestle with that as Christina, that I'm supposed to be doing this at this time. And if I do this, I should be getting this. And no one told me I had to do those things, or no one explicitly told me that. But it's my own inner desire to be perfect, that I think they're also similarly wrestling.
Definitely. I think that's another thing I liked about your guys' characters is the relatability aspect. Because I feel like most people go through that where we're our biggest critics. And we're the ones who keep pushing ourselves to that limit where it's just like, when do I stop? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
The answer is never, in a way, right? I mean, hopefully we stop beating up on ourselves. I think as women, that is such a, mostly the cruelest voices in there, right? But I think in terms of continuing to push ourselves to places that we don't know if we can succeed, I think that's actually the key to life. And, it really is just, I think if you know you can do it, it's probably let somebody else do it, and if you don't know if you can do it, give it a try.
And what are you guys excited for fans to see in the series?
I'm excited for people to see people from different points of views, different perspectives, different political ideologies coming together in friendship, and that their differences don't get in the way of that, but in fact, their differences make their relationships deeper. I think that in this moment, this election year that we're in, it's going to be such a refreshing sort of escape to see a political show that's actually, politics is just the background. It's really about friendship and the bonds between these characters.
Yeah, I think it's the reminder that most people actually want to understand other people. Like most people do. And I think that we have a climate in which that's not pushed forward at all. And the opposite is pushed forward. And I love a show that isn't preachy about it in any way, but through experience, you can live in a world where people are talking to each other and people are prioritizing support and human connection over, do I believe the exact same thing as you? Because part of being alive, and as we talked about, the experience of how we're raised, we have, the more we can learn from other people, the more empathetic we can be, the better the world will be. And for some reason, I think these women who come in as competitors end up going, oh, actually, these are the people I want to hang out with. And like, I'm learning so much from these people. And it's okay if we don't agree on everything, but we have each other's backs. Like that's something I want people to experience from it.
I can definitely attest that that is what that came across to me for sure. This show is inspired by Amy's best-selling book, Chasing Hill. So, what was it like for you all to take those elements from the book and bring it to life in a series?
It was a huge privilege. I think what was so great about the show, about the experience, is that we knew we didn't want to live in reality. We didn't want to relive 2016. We didn't want a Trump world. We wanted to play in a fantasy world. And I think that was, the jumping off point that made it really exciting for me. I say that we came up with my imaginary best friends, right? So, but early on, Greg Berlanti read the book and said it lives in this chapter, The Girls on the Bus, about, very different women who are forced together in this very strange pressure cooker, and they end up finding family and the kind of friendship they didn't know they needed, but can't live without by the end. So I think that was what was so fun. I think I would have been less excited. It was like, just write everything you went through, but like, make it a TV show. I think it was much more fun playing in the fantasy of it all, but also I think we get to, say a lot of things about the world and hopefully embed a lot of messages and debates, contemporary debates about women and feminism and journalism and politics, through this fictional lens. I think that was the most exciting part.
Well, I think it was fun for Amy to be able to separate herself from Sadie, because it was a world we were building based on a chapter of a book and not Amy's memoir, her day-to-day life, laid out like a journal. So she got to have a lot of fun exploring the fantasy of like, oh, what would Sadie do here? Or how messed up can Sadie be? Like without worrying that her mom was going to be on the other end of the phone being like, why did you say that about our family? So she got to inspire the character and help build the world without having it truly based on her.
And I was the idiot who kept calling Amy Sadie the entire time. Every time we were in the room, every time we were on set, I would be like, Sadie, Amy, Sadie, Sadie. Yeah, but they're different people. Different.
So, one of the many things I enjoyed about the show was the depiction of the various forms of journalism and the ways in which it has shifted till today. So, what do you hope to get across to viewers with this series and the overall characters?
Yeah, well, I come, obviously I was a journalist my whole career until recently. And so I hope what viewers come away with is that journalists work really, really hard. These girls are working hard. Their lives are total dumpster fires because they're completely committed to the job. And they're really, at the end of the day, trying to get the truth. Even as Sadie says in the beginning, these days the truth is whatever you want to believe. Even in an era when people don't trust the media, they're trying their hardest to get it right, and it's a really, really hard job, and it's not glamorous. And so I want that to come across. And then I also just want, like, I would love for young people to find it, to think it's a cool career, to think of it the way we always talk about Almost Famous, when he's a young rock journalist and joins the band and the bus. It'd be great. I would love for it to inspire kids to pursue a journalism dream at a time when a lot of people are negative about the industry.
And I just love making shows about women, and specifically women who can be in positive um, and surprising and delightful friendships with other women. I think that when these things are done well, the audience comes, and the audience is so moved by this. And yet, all too often that the audience doesn't come, and so they stop making shows like this. So my hope is that it finds its target, that it entertains this base of people that we really wanted to be entertaining, and that it reminds people that when you put storytelling in the hands of women about women, you can actually run a great business as well, and be successful as well.
And I think the only last thing I would add is that I hope it sort of it gives viewers who are watching it an opportunity to say, respect what you don't know. I think one of the things that I love about the show is Grace respects Lola, and Lola respects Grace, and Sadie and Kimberlyn, and all of them sort of find value in what the other one is doing, even though they come about it very differently through very different lens and with very different levels of expertise. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you just have a baseline of respect and kindness for the people around you, I mean, the world could actually be a lot better.
And I agree with everything you guys said. Like, I went to school for journalism. So when I was in school, we talked about all the different ways of how journalism can help basically make the world better, especially on how you report. So we had a class where we talked about objectivity and unbiased media. And I feel like in this show, we're seeing how being objective and sometimes being unbiased doesn't really work, because everybody goes to specific outlets and specific locations for a specific opinion and point of view. So in terms of the show, do you guys believe that objectivity can strip away the authenticity of journalism?
I mean, I
From a
love
layman's point of view,
Yeah, please.
I was terrified. There's a line in the pilot, I think, where Bruce says to Sadie, we've been objective for 50 years and they hate us more than ever. And I thought, my God, like, is this going to project to journalists everywhere that we are saying that objectivity is no longer achievable? And if we are saying that, are we going to get killed by it? And I was saying this out loud to another journalist, and he's like, "Oh, honey, this is a conversation that is a long time coming, and I'm so excited that you're having it." And so that like calmed me down. And that's just from a purely, the point of view of someone who's didn't want to accidentally make a statement without understanding what kind of statement I was making. So I looked to Amy to really make sure that what we were saying was really crystal clear.
That's what was fun about creating these 4 very different types of journalists, is we can have the debates that happen in journalism school and in newsrooms everywhere, but through these characters. And I think Lola's perspective is one that I kept hearing from journalism students, from young people that were working at the Times, which is that it's a myth, objectivity. You had back in the day when everybody thought there were objective newsmen, they were men. They were usually white men covering other white men. They had no skin in the game. There's an argument to be made that everybody brings their own personal perspective to a story, and to pretend otherwise is to kind of is actually sort of dishonest. So should we be honest? Should we say, I'm bringing this perspective to my story, and this is how I see things, and you can decide for yourself? I think that is a debate happening, and I think Grace is a great is a great character to argue the other side, to say, if you're saying I can't be objective, you're saying I can't do my job. I mean, that like offends her deeply to her core. She completely believes in objectivity. So I honestly like kind of love that we don't have the answer, but we are inserting these conversations that are happening into our imaginary friends' mouths.
And I think, Amy, you said it, one of the first things you said is we are all informed by who we are and our background. And I think in terms of television, we're not the first people to do it. I think I remember so clearly the Kings when they were talking about The Good Wife, because the judges on The Good Wife are always such memorable characters. And we tend to think or believe or hope that judges are objective and judges are, but of course they're not. Judges come in with their own baggage and judges are coming in from their own lives. And the Kings, I remember when they were talking about it, said, don't be fooled. Every single person that's encompassing every single occupation is coming to their job with their baggage. And sometimes it helps you and sometimes it hurts you, but it's always the truth. And I think journalism is just yet another avenue and a great place to have the discussion because it's so rooted in journalism, but judges is another place where I was like, oh yeah, that's real tricky.
I mean, one of my favorite lines in the pilot is when Kimberlyn says, oh, the liberal media broke it and it's all hail the scoop queen if we broke it. And she said, and Grace says, we're not liberal, we're objective. And she says, keep telling yourself that. Because I love that line, because I think that there is a lot of readers who don't believe, who even the objective journalism, like, no, you're not, you're elitist or you're this or that, so.
Definitely. I agree with every point you guys made. Thank you guys so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca with The Nocturnal. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm good. So start off by telling me a little bit about both of your characters.
Well, Sadie McCarthy is a journalist for a paper of record. She is someone who romanticizes a kind of a bygone era of campaign reporting. She's neurotic, she's spunky, she's super sharp, and she loves journalism with a passion.
Yeah. And she's very charming. You do a very charming portrayal.
Yes, you do.
Lola Rahai is a quick, confident, sharp-witted Gen Z TikToker, political activist. She uses social media as her platform and she has a really wide reach. And I feel like she is the new wave of reporting and connecting politics to the younger generation by doing it in a real, authentic, no walls in between me and you type of way.
And one of the things I think I enjoyed really about both of your characters is how they represent like various forms of journalism. So while preparing for your role, what do you feel like you have gained and understand about how media helps when it comes to politics and elections?
I felt like the activists and political reporters that I find online are doing like God's work truly, and they get a bad rep. Like, I kept getting asked like, oh, how did you come up against like that horrible reputation? And I was like, I don't know. From my perspective, like they're killing it. You know what I mean? These people that I follow, who I get my news from, they're breaking down what seems like very difficult, hard to reach political topics, and they're just making it simple for viewers and followers and making it accessible, honestly, to the everyman type of thing. So yeah, I feel like I loved that about my character and the way she reports.
And in terms of Sadie, I think that because she romanticizes this sort of yesteryear of journalism, like she really has an integrity to her about getting to the truth and nailing the story and not running it because she, I think, innately knows the impact that her words could have on shaping an election. Even like the power of the press is really poignant to her. All of the women really, I think, in their own regard. But she also is grappling with objectivity and subjectivity and what's better. Is it better to have an authentic voice or to just state the facts? So that's something that I learned a lot more about that I didn't even really think about when I digested my news before we did the show.
I think for both of your characters, like I see that shift. Like I see us going more to social media to get information, but also it's like some things are not objective anymore and things aren't as biased as well, unbiased as they used to be. So I see that shift and I think it's very relatable and it's like it fits our time now very well because we see it in our everyday.
Yeah, and we're dealing with those different things right now in real time, right?
Yeah.
Like we're dealing with the way things have been and the way journalism, not just journalism, but like every industry.
Mhm.
And then also what does it mean to have the internet and social media be booming right now? And what's difficult and how has it made life easier? Like that's all happening in real time. So I think the show does a really good job of showing that.
Yeah, and the importance of being involved in all of
Yeah.
it and keeping yourself informed and
Mhm.
that like really every election is an important election and maybe we have been a little complacent.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think I fall into that to a fault as well. So, what do you guys feel is so like is relatable about your characters to yourselves? Like, what about your characters is relatable to you?
I definitely relate to Sadie's anxiety.
Mm.
I can get really in my head and
I did not expect you to say that.
Really?
No, I did not expect you to say that.
recognizes my strengths. Like
Yeah,
she
I'm like, no way. I mean, yeah, like we all get in our head, but I'm surprised. Yeah.
I relate to like how wound tight she can get. I'm not to that extent, like she is stressed, but
Yeah.
I also can relate to her passion. I
Yeah.
really love what I do and I feel so grateful that I get to do it. And
She's also good at she's kind of like a good middle person. And I think you're really good at that. Like I think you are like being able to kind of see like are you a Libra, right? Yeah, balance. Like
Very Libra.
being able to be like, you know, you're just likable. It's easy to like you. And I think Sadie also has that skill. Like she's just kind of likable. It's not like she's walking around and people are being like, she caused havoc, you know? Yeah. I think with Lola, I relate to her passion. I relate to the fact that she is saying that the world is different and she's on the side of like let's evolve. I very much relate to that. I think that there's so many systems in place. We have been functioning in systems and no matter what career path you look at, in this show, we're examining journalism, and Lola's saying, I don't care what the rules were, which of course she sometimes gets in trouble for. But she says, I don't care what the rules were because I want us, you, me, my friends, the people I care about, the people I love, queer people, people of color, trans people. I want us to be included. I want us to feel like we have a seat at the table. So I'm actually not going to function in your system because it didn't work for me in the past. And I relate to that. I think that's just kind of a common thing of also like my generation. I feel like it's just normal to be like, no, this doesn't work anymore. So no, thank you.
Right. Let's try something new and see if that works better. Definitely.
Like opening more doors, I think.
Exactly, exactly. And my final question is, what 3 words would you guys use to describe the show?
Carla Gugino.
Carla Gugino.
Carla.
Goddess.
Yeah. Heart, soul, perfection. What 3 words? Like connection.
Absurd. We get a little cuckoo.
Yeah. And like meaningful, passionate, like compassion, maybe.
Definitely, definitely. I agree. I see the all of the show. I would say entertaining for sure as well. Tell me a little bit about both of your characters.
Okay. Yeah, my character is Loafers. That is his name. He also has another name, but we'll keep that a surprise. But he's Loafers. He's the recent newly hired poached, actually, press secretary for the Democratic front runners. So he's an awesome strategist and has risen through the ranks fairly quickly because last election cycle he was a little lower. He was a low low member of the staff, and then now he's on this awesome stage of being a press secretary.
And I'm an editor, probably a senior editor at a paper that's a long-standing paper, much like the New York Times, say, and who has also come up through the ranks. as a journalist and now senior editor. I've got a short fuse. I'm a recovered crackhead, self-admitted crackhead. And I'm fighting sobriety and trying not to lose my temper. And I play a character who's very heavily invested in Sadie, who he thinks is his most talented reporter for the paper.
I think both of your characters' interactions with Sadie is one of my favorites because you guys both have different dynamics with her. And she, like, when she's losing her mind, I feel like you guys are just like, wait, okay, let's come back down to earth a little bit. So, what are you both excited for fans to see during the series?
The stories unfold. I mean, I think it's such great writing, and the performances I was blown away by. I during this political time, I think it's great to have some humor, some levity amidst this subject matter, and there's a lot of hope and friendship in there, and I would love for there to be. I think there's potential for a lot of memes here. There's some great one-liners and great clips, and it'd be exciting for folks to just kind of escape with this show.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking forward to the fans seeing kind of what the people that go into the stories that they follow, whatever outlet they happen to be following, and just sort of see that the reporters lead really flawed and fascinating lives and make mistakes like everyone else. But I like procedural. I wouldn't call this a procedural, but it's a very it really shows the nuts and bolts of what goes into a story and the lives of the storytellers.
I agree. I agree. And while preparing for the series, do you guys feel like you've learned anything or have a better understanding of how major of a role that media plays when it comes to politics and elections?
There are just so many alternatives for people to get their information, and so many that most people can find the outlet that they agree with, that are telling them what they want to hear. And biased newspapers, rather unbiased newspapers, who report stories with as much perspective as possible, they're under threat of not being believed. So it's a very exciting time, and also a kind of scary time of how information is doled out and what people choose to believe.
I would hope from this, like Griffin said, to kind of see the nuts and bolts, the behind the scenes of journalism, and especially during a presidential primary or campaign in general. I think that it's exciting to see this, and hopefully it would spark some curiosity, because it did for myself, for audiences about journalism, because we create all these assumptions. At a certain point we get so hardened in our perspectives of everything, but I think this show could also just, the curiosity will have you just kind of softening or looking for a new angle or just a new perspective around it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Thank you guys so much for speaking with me today.